Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm real excited today because I've been a big fan of this individual we have on today. She's an author, a writer, has her own podcast, motivational speaker, and she is just a phenomenal human being, one that you're going to get to really know. So it is my honor to introduce to you the one and only Miss Christy Adams. And Christy, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor and a pleasure for me.
Thank you. Listen, when I got the email last weekend, it's such an honor for me to be here. It really is. I am on the other side. I'm on the side that you're on, and so I don't really go on many podcasts or anything. So when I got your email, I was like, "That's so sweet." So thank you so much. It is a privilege and an honor to be here with you. So,
well, I appreciate that a lot. And Christy, I think the first thing I would ask you about is, listen, we know that you've I believe, published 7 or 8 books. You've ghostwritten 20 or so. So, I mean, writing is obviously a passion for you. So tell me how the love for writing really began for you.
oh gosh, well, since I was little, for sure. When I was little, I just in like grade school, elementary school, we had in our classroom one whole wall was bookshelves. And instead of paying attention to the teacher, I would constantly look at the bookshelves and think, what am I going to read next? And I'll tell you the books that stood out to me: Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, and then all of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. And so I would just think, what am I? So I had a hard time paying attention to the teacher because all I wanted to do was read. So then I started to write really in high school. My 10th grade English teacher would give us, she would say, spend the classes period and do short stories, and that was my escape. And I loved to make up stories. I just loved it. And so that's really as far back as I can remember as far as writing was in high school, and I just really enjoyed it. So, and then it carried over into real life. But I went for a long time. I didn't publish my first book until 2015. And that was 10 years ago when I was 46. So I went all the way from high school until, middle age before I published my first book. So it sat dormant.
And Christy, sometimes that tends to happen to a lot of people. Like, I could look at myself. I went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting, but I really didn't start getting into this till I was like 39 years old. So sometimes you start late, but it's not about how you start, it's how you finish. And to be able to publish your first book at 46 years old, and then of course you had a book that was number 1 on Amazon. I mean, that doesn't get any better than that. So I mean, it just goes to show that it doesn't matter when you do it. After you do it and you've accomplished it, it's still the same feeling you would have even if you were doing it when you were 20.
Absolutely. And I also am a big believer in that things happen when they're meant to. Like if at 25, I couldn't have done this. I mean, I think that a lot of things we do, we have to have life experience before we can do it. I mean, even like with my own, which I know we'll get into this, but even having my own show, I couldn't have done that 20 years ago because I just wouldn't have. I don't think I would have had the wisdom or the discipline. And you know how it is. You have to be disciplined to have a show. A lot of work goes into it, the research of the guests, the actual sitting down doing it. And then, so I think that things happen in life exactly when they're supposed to. So.
Right. Most definitely. And Christy, you mentioned the Nancy Drew books, which are always popular. And as a young kid, I mean, obviously you enjoyed reading, you loved writing, as you said, but we know that you were a big fan of television as well. Was there like a show as a kid that really gravitated towards? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, when I was really small, I loved stuff like Gilligan's Island, the Brady Bunch, all that. And then when I was 11 and Knots Landing came on, which is a spinoff of Dallas. And if you don't know what Knots Landing is, I don't know if we can be friends, but yeah. So when Knots Landing came on, my mom would watch that. And I actually wrote a letter to the Knots Landing ladies has the We're Not Done Yet podcast. And I actually wrote a letter to them, and I gave it to them last week too. I printed it out and gave it to them in Dallas. And I told exactly how I started watching Knots Landing and what the show meant to me and how it fit into my life. My mom didn't raise me. My dad died 5 days before I turned 6. He got shot and he got killed. And so my mom, she, had a breakdown. And so she gave me and my sister to our grandparents. Well, a couple of years later, she came back for my sister, but she just left me with my grandparents. So they raised me. But on Thursdays, I would go to her house and visit. But on Thursdays, I noticed that because she loved Dallas on Fridays, but on Thursdays, she loved Knots Landing. And so I thought, hey, this is a way for me to get to spend time with my mom. So I'll go over there on Thursdays and stay with her. And so to be able to sit with her and watch Knots Landing and be happy, then that was that bond for us, if that makes sense, because we were never close. Even, she died 20 years ago in July, maybe 20 years ago. We were never close after that. But we did have some things that we kind of bonded over, and Knots Landing was one of them. And my mom was Abby, for real. I'm not joking. She was gorgeous. She was driven in her career after she bounced back from her mental health issues. She was driven in her career. She dressed to the nines. It was all about the makeup. My mom had one bedroom that was turned into like a makeup room. And she was the epitome of Abby. Men just loved her. And so that really, I think that was my bond with my mom. Of course, I went on to love Knots Landing for my own self, for my own reasons. But Knots Landing, my all-time favorite show, hands down. Have watched the series completely through multiple times, as I'm sure you have too.
Right. And, as we get on with this, we'll do a little talk with that because I think it'll be fun. But I have to ask this, Christy. You just mentioned you lost your dad when you were almost 6 years old and didn't really have the bond with your mom that you probably would have liked. Yet you've gone on to grow up and be such an optimistic and positive person, someone who's impacted so many people, inspired so many people. And to go through trauma like that and to still be able to do what you're doing in your life today, it just says a lot about you as a person. But I would ask this is, for somebody who went through that, like yourself, how were you able to bounce back from tough hardships like that?
Well, I credit my grandmother. My grandmother was an extraordinary person. She died in 1999 from Alzheimer's and a stroke, but she was just the kindest, most humble human I've ever met in my life. My son is a lot like her. And she loved everybody. She didn't make a difference with anybody. She loved everybody. And she was always positive. I never heard my granny say a bad word about anyone. Like I said, she just loved. I remember one time, my grandma, she used to make, because, I'm originally from West Virginia, so I'm talking country, and you can probably hear it in my accent. I now live in Tennessee. But my granny would make a big pan of biscuits for us every morning, and then she would make an extra pan and call somebody in the neighborhood to come get them. So she done that for a different family every day. And I asked her one day, I was a teenager, and I said, Mama, why do you do that? And she said, I would feed a snake if it was hungry. And that's who my granny was. And so I really credit her with helping me to be the person I am, because I do strive to have a kind heart. I do try to be kind to people. Sometimes it's hard, but I love everybody. And I believe that also part of me thinks that the reason that I am the way that I am, being an overachiever, is because I feel like I've been in survival mode all my life, if that makes sense, starting from when my dad got killed and then my mom kind of checked out. And so I feel like, I think I've been in survival mode. So I think that might be why. But also there's other factors as well that I really won't go into, like the relationship with my mom that wasn't so good. It was really good between her and my sister, but I feel like that.
Right. You're freezing up a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. So, yeah.
But yeah, I just
right. I could see you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just feel like that sometimes when you do go through trauma like that, it makes you be an overachiever, if that makes sense. So I think that's where it comes from too.
Right. And I look at it this way too, Christy. Yeah, you just mentioned him earlier before we came on air. You talked about your son Joshua, and I think that if there is a positive about not having the a close relationship with your mother, is it made you probably want to make sure that you were very close with your child, and you could tell the bond that you have with Joshua, and he obviously lives with you, and you both are just very close. So I mean, there always is a positive to a negative, and that's the positive in that sense, is that I think you made sure that you were going to be the best parent to him that you possibly could be.
Absolutely. Like I said, my mom, I don't say bad things about my mom because I have a master's degree in psychology. And so I before I started doing my show, I was actually a counselor, a mental health and substance abuse counselor. And so I kind of look behind people's behaviors or behind their actions and try to see who they are as a person and why they do the things they do. And this is not something I could have done 30 years ago with my mom, but now, I can look back and go, okay, she did what she did because she went through what she went through. She was 24 with two little girls and her husband was killed in front of her. And so I'm like, yeah, that was enough to send her over the edge. And so she just struggled. So, but I knew that when I had a child, I was going to be different. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cuss at him. I wasn't going to be angry all the time. And I wasn't going to say, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're goofy. I was never going to do that to him. And so from the time he was born, I would tell him, you're a genius. You are so smart. I just tried to shape him and mold him to know who he was, to believe that he was all that, you know what I mean? And it worked. I mean, he graduated valedictorian of his class. And so it really works. Yeah. So, but no, he actually lives in Jacksonville, Florida, but he came up to visit me because back in the spring I had gotten sick and the doctors were kind of concerned that my cancer might be back, my breast cancer. Thank God it wasn't. It's not. And so he came up to stay with me for a little while, and then he ended up staying. And like I said earlier, I'm actually in the process of moving. So he's helping me before he goes back to Florida. So, and I'm so thankful. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I think that's no matter what you do in your life, whether you do the podcast or you're writing books or you're doing this or doing that. And I know you enjoy a bunch of different things, but I would say the proudest accomplishment is seeing him and how he's grown up, because I mean, you can't put any price tag on that whatsoever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always say, I tell everybody when they ask me about wow, you do this or do that. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like the only thing I did right was my son. I don't know. For some reason, I feel like that's the only thing that I actually accomplished was raising a decent human. My son is just, like I said, he reminds me of my granny. He is just so kind, so decent, and he is a huge fan of Not Landing. Huge, because he was raised on SoapNet. So
right. And Christy, I think about this. I know one of your passions is reading. You love to read, and I think nobody could underestimate just how important reading is, because not only, I mean, does it keep your mind fresh and keeps you focused and things like that, but you learn so much when you read. I mean, you learn so many different things. And I'm sure when you're reading different books, as a writer yourself who's wrote books, it gives you an idea and it helps you along the way to be a better writer by reading different books.
It does. And I always say when people ask me, how do I start writing? I'm like, first you got to read. First you have to read, and you have to see and not just do it because you love to read. That's the most important thing, but do it so that you can see how a story flows, how sentence structure flows. I've read some things that people have passed to me and they're like, how does this sound? I'm like, wow, that's like you're jumping from place to place. But to really get the gist of writing, you first have to read. You have to see how it goes. I mean, that would be like me trying to put together, a swing set, and I've never even seen a swing. I just couldn't do it. And so, yeah, so reading is important, especially if you want to be a writer. But I think that reading is just key in life, period. I go back home to West Virginia each spring and they have a little teeny library there in Matewan, West Virginia. And I do the summer reading program, and I go and I take my children's books and I read them to the kids, and then I give them out. And I just always want to instill in children and parents how important reading is, because it's vital. Reading is vital to the development of who we are as people. We can learn so much. I mean, if I just let my son just, grow up or whatever with video games, that's not good. But he loved to read ever since he was, little. We would read him. My mom would read him Garfield. He had a Garfield book. She read that thing so much she had to hide it under the couch one day, and he found it. But yeah, so he loves reading too. So.
Right. And I mean, I think that's like a great thing. I mean, you can never do it enough. I mean, it's something that everybody should do. So, Christy, I know you attended Liberty University. And you got a bachelor's in psychology and Christian counseling. Talk about that and what made you want to get into that as well.
Well, I've always, as far back as I can remember, I've been interested in psychology. And, like I said earlier, I think that the things that we go through prompts us to ask questions about why. So like human behavior was always something that I wanted to understand. Maybe I was trying to figure out my mom or whatever, but I just remember ever since I was growing up, I wanted to know what made people tick and why they did the things they did and why they behaved the way they behaved. And so, I was in my late 20s when I first started college, and I took a couple classes, and like my son was little, when I was married to his dad at the time, and I really didn't finish. And then in my 40s, I went back and I was like, well, my early 40s, but it wasn't until I was in 2018 that I actually was like, I'm all in. I've got to do this. So, in 2021, I think it was 2021, I graduated with my bachelor's, and after that I went on to pursue my master's degree in developmental psychology, which is not a licensure program. It's more like on the research side. But the jobs that I worked, I was able to do like group therapy and be a facilitator and stuff like that. So that is my passion. Like, I love working in recovery and mental health. I love that. But I will tell you this, it's very stressful, very taxing, and you really have to leave it at the office at the end of the day, because I've come home before and sat in a bubble bath and been worried to death about my clients, and you can't do that because it will engulf your life, and I was like, okay, I have to leave this. And my boss would say, Christy, you got to leave it here. But I just wanted to see people succeed, and I wanted to see them recover and get off the substances, and then even recover from or like manage their bipolar, manage their schizophrenia. And so I think that when you're in this field, you have a different kind of a passion about it. So yeah, but that's my true love. But I'm not doing that right now because I'm concentrating on my own show, my network, and things like that. So
right.
I'm so sorry, my dog.
Oh, no worries at all. But the thing that's remarkable too, Christy, is, you said around 2018 is when you said, I'm going to do it, things like that. And then 2019, your book, Speak Life, gets published in July, and it reaches #1 on Amazon. So listen, at the end of the day, you don't do it for accolades. You don't do it for recognition. You do it because you really love to write and you're inspired by doing it. But at the same time, it's got to make you feel good when people recognize the work you put in, and that's the reward that it's #1 on Amazon. I mean, that says that so many people really enjoyed it, and that's got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, it is. And, I was just talking to my producer, Adam, this morning, and I was talking about, I do want to mention this. I used to I had my own talk show on a channel here in locally in East Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains called Severe TV. And I did that for 2 years. And then I left there and I started my own network. It's faith-based. We have a lot of Christian shows. Like, it's all family-friendly programming. And so, I recruited people, I recruited hosts, and I was like, hey, do you want to have a show on my network? And what I noticed is that some of them that came on were chasing fame. And when they didn't find it in 6 months, they were like, I'm out. And I told Adam this morning, I said, you really have to do what we do because you just love doing it. I love interviewing people. And I know you do too. So I love to do an interview. I love to find out about people. I love to listen to people. I love to ask questions. And that's why I do it. I don't do it because I'm trying to see my name in lights anywhere, and that's why I write. I write because there's stories inside of me that want to come out. And also with the Speak Life, the devotional,
right.
I just want to help people. And of course, like, I don't know, I'm a Christian and I'm not ashamed of my faith. My faith is everything to me. And so when I wrote that book, I was like, I really prayed for like a year and I was like, God, show me the scriptures that you want me to use in this. And I feel like he did. So there's 31, it's a 31-day devotional. And yeah. And so when it went to number one in its category, not Amazon, I didn't beat like everybody, but I did beat Joyce Meyer. I don't know if you know who she is, but right. Anyway, yeah. So for a couple of days I was ahead of her, but anyway, that it does make you feel good because it lets me know that there are people who are benefiting from what, came down from God through me to get out there to other people. So yeah, I don't do it for, like you said, I don't do it for any kind of awards or anything like that. Like my last children's book, they're all on Amazon. My last children's book, I didn't even advertise it. I don't even know if my followers on Facebook know if I even have a third children's book because I wrote it I just wrote it and put it out there. So because I love to write. So.
Right. And Christy, of course, you're the founder of Close to My Heart Breast Cancer Foundation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people that know what you've went through, but for the people that don't, just talk a little bit about, because you are a survivor, obviously, and you've had to go through a very tough ordeal. And yet, again, anytime I'd see you like on a show or your podcast, the only reason I would know you had breast cancer is because you had talked about it. But if I wouldn't even know that you were sick because you never stopped being who you were. So just talk about what that battle has been like for you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good compliment. I have a friend. She actually passed away 2 years ago on August 20th. She was my best friend. And she would tell me all the time after I got better, she would say, Christy, to look at you, you would never know that you went through stage 3 breast cancer. And that was, to me, that's a compliment. But yeah, so in 2018, I was just living my life. I was, I had just moved to Tennessee. I was working my dream job at Dollywood. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dollywood, but it's Dolly Parton's theme park here in the Smoky Mountains. And I was working in a home decor store there, going to school. Me and my son, we were just living our best life. He was still here with me. And one day I was doing homework and my chest was itching and I reached up to scratch my chest and I felt a little teeny tiny jelly bean sized lump on my chest. And of course it scared me because, we've all heard the lump. And then so I called my doctor's office. They said, come in tomorrow morning. And I did. And she said, it's a fluid filled cyst, but if it gets bigger, let us know. Well, fast forward to October and it had grown to the size of like a golf ball. So I went back in, they were like, it's fluid filled. We're going to send you next door to the breast center, have it aspirated. You'll be fine. Fast forward 18 months later, they had aspirated that thing 6 times. And each time it kept coming back bigger and bigger to where the last time they aspirated it, they took 147 cc's of fluid off my chest, which is the equivalent of a liter. You know what a 2-liter soda is. So this was equivalent to a liter, which was a lot. And it was gigantic. And so I was having I don't want to get too much into the gross details, but anyway, I was having a lot of discharge, bloody discharge, pus and all that from my breast. And it hurt. And I knew it was cancer and I just knew it was, but I was in such denial. I didn't want to go to the doctor. And so the last doctor that aspirated it at the breast center, he said, you need to see a surgeon. And I was like, okay. And I think that was in like November of 2019. And I put it off until February of 2020 until I finally went. And when I went, the doctor, the breast surgeon, he did a lumpectomy and found, and the cyst on my chest was a fluid filled cyst. So that wasn't anything at all. So when he cut that lump out, the cancer was hiding behind the cyst on the chest wall. Him and my oncologist said they'd never seen a case like that. And so I always say that little lump that started out as a jelly bean and grew to be huge was God's way of saying, pay attention. I'm trying to get your attention. My body was screaming, hey, there's something going on in here and you need to pay attention. And so, yeah, it took one doctor to say, this isn't normal. You should not be coming back every 6 weeks and having this thing aspirated. And so, yeah. And so then I started my journey through chemo, mastectomy, 31 rounds of radiation. I was in treatment for a little over a year. So.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing of it is too, Christy, is like, just to try and beat the disease, what you have to go through sometimes is worse than the actual disease. It's no picnic, of course. And yet you, like I said, never stopped being who you were. If you were in discomfort or you were not feeling good, you never showed it on the air. You never let people see it. I mean, what drives you to, be inspired like that to continue to move on?
Well, honestly, when the doctor first told me, when he first said, Miss Adams, it's cancer, of course, I was just like, I told him, I said, well, I kind of knew that. I kind of knew in my heart, but I said, let's get a plan together. Let's go right now. And he was like, hold up. This was February. And then we didn't actually start chemo until April. He said, there's a lot of things we have to do. I have to meet with I have to meet with the oncology team. We have to get this plan. Of course I had to have a port placed. So, but my thing from the beginning was like, let's just get into this. That's who I've always been. I'm one that I go head first into a storm. I tackle whatever's in front of me. And like I said earlier, I think where I've always been in survival mode all my life. I told somebody once, I said, if I could draw or illustrate, I would picture me as wearing boxing gloves and just spending my whole life just punching through, because that's what I've had to do my whole life. I've just had to punch. And I'm not saying I'm no different than anybody else. We all have to do that because we all have trials and we all have, things that we go through. But as far as the cancer, yeah, I just wanted a plan. I wanted to get started on my treatment. I wanted to get it over with. And I told my friend the other night on the phone, I said, when I was sick, I really didn't think I was sick. I don't know. I look back at those pictures and I'm like, God, I look like death warmed over. I mean, I was really sick. I'd lost so much weight. I was bald. My eyes were like black underneath. I lost all of my fingernails, all of my toenails. That's a side effect of chemo. The mouth sores, the ulcers in the throat, in the nose. It was terrible. But at the time, I didn't feel like a sick person. And I don't know, I think that sounds silly, but I didn't feel like, I didn't look at myself and go like, oh, you're sick. I felt like, well, this is just something I'm going through. I'll be okay. I never thought I was going to die. I really didn't. And my oncologist told me, he said, if everybody had your mindset, more people would survive, because a lot of it is your mindset. I just always knew in my heart that God was going to take care of me. I did. And that's, the reason I wanted to write that book, because my faith really got me through. It really did. And so, but also I was going to college too. I never stopped taking classes. I mean, I remember sitting in my recliner being so sick I could barely hold my head up and typing papers. But I had to have that. I thank God for that, because that helped take my mind off of my cancer. So, yeah.
Right. And I think about this, Christy. You get a new appreciation for any person who goes through cancer, and you see what they have to go through. You really do get a new appreciation for them, but you also really understand just how awful this disease can be. And I mean, I think of Shannon Doherty, who fought breast cancer for 10 years, I believe, and, fought it like a champion. And you would hear so many stories about how she never let it get to her. And, people, I know she passed away, but I still look at her as a survivor, because you know what? She fought it every day. And just because, she didn't live doesn't mean she wasn't a survivor either.
Exactly. And I'm a part of 2 breast cancer Facebook groups, and honestly, they helped to get me through too. And we talk a lot in there about how just because someone passes away from breast cancer doesn't mean that breast cancer defeated them, because just to be able to fight means that you are a warrior somehow. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, maybe it did take them out, but they fought it. And so that goes a long way, just being that fighter. Because I will tell you this, you can't be weak if you're gonna fight cancer, and if you're gonna have chemo, because chemo was the hardest thing that my body's ever been through, because it takes you, it strips everything from you. It takes you all the way down to nothing. Like my white blood count was 0, and there was times I couldn't even get up and walk. My son had to help me. I mean, he was so supportive. He was here with me during that. And my son was in college full time. He was working full time and taking care of me full time. And it was during COVID. It was 2020. So he was having to go to the store, come home, spray all of the groceries with Lysol out on the porch before he brought him in, because I was so susceptible. And he drug his mattress from his bedroom into my bedroom and slept in my floor on his mattress for 6 months during my 6 months of chemo.
Wow.
So yeah, my son, he is, yeah, he's so strong, and he's always been my hero. So yeah.
Right. And Christy, obviously this podcast that you've been doing, and I really enjoy it a lot. And listen, I know you know this, that no matter how many of them you do, you're always a little nervous before you start. For me, it's always my openings and my endings, like making sure I do those right. But once you're interviewing the person, you're so relaxed and you just enjoy it so much. And this is going years back, so I can't be 100% sure, but I almost want to say, weren't you on an episode of Dr. Phil and they gave you a new car? Am I right?
Was, absolutely. Yes. So December the 9th will be 10 years ago. And so how that came about is that, a couple of years before that, I had been in a domestic violence relationship, or a relationship where there was domestic violence. And, I left that relationship, and I was like at home one day, and I was folding towels, sitting in front of my, TV, folding towels in the basket. And Robin, his wife, came on, and she talked about a contest that they were doing, because she has a domestic violence foundation called When Georgia Smiled, and Georgia is her mother, and Georgia went through domestic violence with Robin's father. And so she said, like, this is what we're going to do. You give $10 and you get one entry, and it was going to benefit her foundation. And I was like, wow, and then the prize was an overnight trip to see the taping of the show, and that's it. And so I, went online, gave my $10, and didn't think anything else about it. I think that was August of 2015. Didn't think anything else about it. And then the week of Thanksgiving that year, a few months later, I got an email, from Dr. Phil producers saying, hey, can we call you? And I was like, sure, I'm at work. I was working at a clothing store. I said, I'll be having my lunch around 7 this evening, or, it was like my lunch. And so I went next door to Bob Evans, and they called me, and I was like, what? I didn't believe, listen, things there's so many scammers in the world now. You're like, I don't know if I believe this or not. And so they said, can we call you later? And I said, y'all call me tonight. So they called me that night. When I got home, they called me, and we did kind of like this, a screen, but I didn't think it was real. So I had my laptop down on the floor, and I was looking down into it. And when they were like, well, we're sorry to say that you're not the winner. They said, well, we're sorry to tell you you're one of the finalists. And I was like, well, that's great. At least I got in the finalists. And then they were like, no, we're joking. You're the grand prize winner. And I went nuts. I was like,
yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And then a couple of days later, Robin actually called me herself, and we did like a Zoom call. And when I saw her, I was just like, oh my God, and she asked me, she said, would you please tell your story on the air? And at that time, I did not want to go on national TV and tell my dirty laundry. I was like, no. And she said, you got out. You're a survivor. She said, so many women and men don't get out. And she said, I feel like you could help a lot of people if you do this. And reluctantly, I agreed. And so they flew me and my son out there and kept us for a week and treated us like royalty, like we were a VIP. That's what they call us, VIP. And I'm not used to that. Like, I'm a little country girl. I'm just not used to that. And so when we filmed the show on Wednesday, December the 9th, and I think it aired that next week on the 16th, they shocked me by giving me a brand new car at the end. They gave us, and behind the scenes, they gave us money as well. And, they could have used that to their advantage and kind of exploited that, but they didn't. And that really touched me because they gave us several $1,000s to move away from the place I was living, which was about 5 miles from where my abuser lived at the time. And so, yeah, it was a fantastic experience and one I'll never forget. So they were very kind.
Right. And Christy, you don't want to touch on it, it's fine. But the fact that you did go through a domestic situation, and those are never fun, and you were able to overcome that. It just seems like to me, Christy, that you fight back with everything. It doesn't matter what life presents you. You're never going to quit. And you didn't quit when that situation was happening. Then the struggles with the cancer, and no matter what the situation is, like, it all goes back to when you were a little kid. You've always fought and fought and fought. And I think that's the message that, you send more than anything else is, I remember Jim Valvano, who I was a big fan of, a great coach, and he had cancer and died at 47 years old. But through it all, he kept saying, don't give up. Don't ever give up. That was his quote. And that's really what you are, because you have never given up ever.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I can't. I don't know. I feel there's the word give up and quit is not in me. I mean, I don't know. It's just never been an option because, last year I lost my husband. He died on June 1st last year. And if there was ever a time that almost took me out, it was that time. I mean, I got very depressed because I felt like a part of me died too. And if there was ever a time that I come close to just wanting to give up, it was then. But then I was like, but I can't give up because I still have a life to live and I still have so much to do and I still have a son. And my husband wouldn't want me to do that either. And, like this past weekend, being in Dallas last weekend, he would have loved that he loved Sue Ellen. He loved that character. He loved Linda Gray and he loved Larry Hagman. And so when I went, I took him with me in spirit, and so he would not have wanted me to just lay down and quit and give up and say, I can't do this. So I picked myself up. I remember late August last year, and I took my dog and I said, Smokey, we're going to drive to Florida and see Josh. And so I loaded Smokey in the car, and that was the first time I'd ever been on a long trip like that by myself. And I just drove down to Jacksonville and visited my son for a few days. And after that, I really feel like I started to kind of come out of that deep depression I was in. So, but now I will tell you, like that was tough. That was really tough. So.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think about the podcast you do, and I really enjoy it. Like I said, as good as I am, you make me look like an amateur, but I've got to say this, just watching these different episodes. I mean, sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're fun. I mean, I think of the country stars you had on that one day. They played a little bit and things like that. So, I mean, talk to me about, it's got to be a labor of love more than anything else when you do these podcasts. So just talk about how enjoyable it's been for you.
Oh, it's been fun. Listen, all my life I've been a talker. Well, I've just, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday about the standardized testing in school and like how we shouldn't clump all kids or try to judge all children by one test, because some kids might be good at math and science, but some might be good at talking like me. And so, I didn't do well on standardized testing in school, but then when I got older, I used my talents for a talk show now. So, we can't just put people in boxes. But anyway, so yeah, I've always loved to talk and I've always loved to listen. And so and this kind of goes way back. So in 2021, whenever I wrote my book about my cancer journey, I had met a lady in the breast cancer support group who lives in Dallas, and she had a talk show down there. She invited me down to be on her talk show. So I went down, and then I was on her show, and I was a nervous wreck. I was just like, because before that I'd only done Dr. Phil. And then I was on the local news here like a couple of times about my foundation and my book, but I'd never went anywhere and done an actual real show. And she was like, you need your own show. You're really good at this. And I was like, I can't do this. But so I did. I ended up doing a show short term. I think I did maybe 8 or 10 episodes at her studio. So I would fly down to Dallas and do a couple of 2 or 3 episodes and then fly home the next day. And then I would go back. And that was just too much for me. It's too much traveling. So I let that go. And then 2023, early 2023, my dear friend, right hand rock, Amy Curry, sent me a message and said, Severe TV is looking for hosts. And she said, you should try this. And I was like, well, I'm sure they're bombarded because, Sevier County, it's, we're full of, it's where Dolly Parton's from. And so everybody here is chasing a dream. Everybody wants to be a star, wants to be a country star or whatever. And I was like, I'm sure they're bombarded with applicants, but I'll try. And I went and I sat with Adam, who was the producer, for like 2 hours trying to sell myself. And he didn't say it. And I was like, would you please just tell me? And he goes, yeah, well, you got the job. And I was like, thank God. Wow. So we started taping about 3 weeks after that. So with Severe TV, their rule was it had to be like 95% local because they really were about local stuff. But with my own network, East Tennessee TV, I just kind of do whatever I want. So I have, I've had people on, well, even like with Adam, he did let me have some, like Jeffrey Reddick. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote, The Final Destination. I got to have him on. I got to have the Moonshiners on, 2 of the Moonshiners, which they live here where I live. But anyway, he did give me some leeway to have on kind of like more famous people and not just have, but I did have to do a lot of like local, like businesses and stuff like that. But I don't care who it is. Listen, I don't care. You can be just a little local storyteller at the library. And I would love to talk. I just love to get to know people. I love to ask questions. And I just love to find out what makes people tick. Why do you like to tell stories at the library? Or why do you like to make soap? Or why do you like to forge metal? Or why do you like to direct movies? So for me, it wasn't so much about, I got to get this big person. I just like to talk to people in general. And I like to talk to people about what they've overcome. That's really, like you're talking to me today. I love talking to people about how did you overcome what you overcame? Because at first I was going to call my show The Overcomers. And I was like, well, I don't really want to stick myself in this little box and only have on overcomers and survivors. So it was the Christy Adams show. But I really do enjoy hearing people talk about how they got through hard times. So,
Yeah. And that's what I love about it the most, Christy, is I feel like when you are going through tough times, you could watch
It froze.
Your show. It gives you a sense of, it froze. Yeah. Now I see you. Yep. It gives you a sense of like that, however you're feeling is okay. Like you don't have to apologize for it. And you kind of feel like, even though I'm watching you and your guest, I could feel like I'm in the room as well because you're kind of talking to all of us. And that's the thing that I really enjoy about it. And it's just another thing that you do that inspires people. And I think like if people haven't seen your show, which I know a lot of people have, they should definitely check it out because you're not just somebody, you're interviewing people, yes, but you're also like people are getting to learn more about different things and you kind of do it together and you don't feel like you're alone all the time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. When I first started, I was really worried about my accent because I'll be honest with you, when you have an accent like mine, a lot of people think that I'm not intelligent. I've heard that. Because it is a very thick country accent. And so people just kind of clump us together. And I was actually, when I was in New York last year, I was on my way to the airport in an Uber and my Uber driver was from Bangladesh and he had a very thick accent and we were talking about accents. And I told him, I said, we were talking about that. And he said that a lot of people don't even pay attention to him because of his accent. And I told him, I said, I totally relate. Like I get that. And so I think that, that was one thing that worried me. But then I had a lot of positive feedback. Like, I love like last weekend when I was, down in Dallas at the hotel, this guy was like, there's Joan Van Ark and Michelle Lee. And I don't know what happened, but I just stepped right up to him and I said, oh my gosh, can I tell you that I just love you? And Joan Van Ark said, you sure can. And I said, I love the show. I'm sure you hear that all the time. She said, where's that accent from? And I said, Tennessee. She went, Tennessee. I love that. So, but people do notice my accent. But it has become, I guess, like maybe my trademark or something. I don't know. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I mean, you always send a great message when you do your shows, and there's a little of everything when you're doing these shows. There's some seriousness, there's some laughter, there's some tears. But with that said, that's what makes the show so enjoyable, is because that's what I think you need to do in life all the time. Is there's going to be some laughter, there's going to be some tears, and you don't need to apologize for either one. If you want to laugh every day, do it. If you feel like crying every day, do it. And that's kind of like what the message you send to the audience and to the people that support you and things like that is: don't apologize for being you. As long as you're a good person, that's all that matters.
Right, exactly. And that's what I would tell my clients at the last mental health facility I worked at. I said, look, of course we want you to be happy, and that's everyone's goal in life. But I told him, I said, inside these four walls, because it was a residential facility and they had to live there for a while. And I said, inside these four walls, you're kind of like isolated and protected from the real world, while we're trying to help you learn how to manage your symptoms and giving you these tools, these coping mechanisms. I said, but once you get out and you go home, life is going to slap you in the face. And I said, it's okay if you have a bad day. Don't go through life trying to fake it or pretend like you're happy. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to say, I'm not okay today, but here's how I'm going to deal with it. Because while you're saying I'm not okay, then you still do have to use your coping mechanisms to get through it, because otherwise it will drag you down and you'll spiral down in depression. But yeah, I remember years ago when Goldie Hawn's children were little, she was on a talk show. I don't know if it was, Johnny Carson, Jay Leno or something. And she said, I've always told my kids to feel what they're feeling at the time until they don't feel it anymore. She said, I never try to say, cheer up or don't feel that way. She allowed them to feel. And, that stuck with me. And so there's days that I'm like, okay, today I feel angry. I don't know why. I'm going to try to figure it out. And I know to like back away from people. Or today I feel really sad. What was my trigger? What got me like that? How can I feel better tomorrow? But it's okay to feel our feelings. It is okay. So I never try to stifle, who people are. I want everybody to be who they are. I want people to be true to who they are. Don't change yourself for anybody. So.
Right. So, Christy, I was thinking about this. I said we'd talk a little bit about Knotsland, and it's your favorite show. I love the show as well. And I was thinking about this not only as we were talking, but even off the air. One thing they never did, nor did Dallas, and I think it was because it was the 80s and it was different back then, but they never did have a storyline about one of the characters having cancer, which was unusual because now you see that in a lot of shows. But I always wonder about that. Like, I think that would have been a great thing for Donna Mills' character, Abby. And I thought the drug storyline with Olivia, you got to see the side of Abby that we knew was there. But if she had to go through a storyline where she's battling cancer and things like that, you really see like a different type of Abby. And I was just surprised they never did do a storyline about somebody battling cancer.
Yeah, because, Laura got the brain tumor, but they sent her off to die.
Yeah, they never showed any. Yeah, it was like they just forced the character. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I was thinking this morning, because listen, I'm not joking when I say it stays on my TV or my phone all day long, every day, even at night when I go lay down. I just let it play because I love it that much. And when I had my cancer in 2020, my son found a lady who makes the DVDs. She's, part of the group, and he ordered me the whole set. And watching that year helped me to get through my cancer too. It just gave me a comfort. It was just familiar, it's like home. And like, only the first 2 seasons were ever out on DVD. But I would have loved to have seen somebody about it. We saw, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but there was a lot of repeat storylines. Like Sid had Sid was paralyzed and then he died. And then Karen got shot and she was paralyzed. And then they repeated that with Paige when Pierce shot her. And so there were stories like that were repeated. But cancer was just like you said, it was nobody ever battled cancer. Maybe they didn't, I don't know, maybe they just didn't know how to deal with it. Or maybe that was something they just didn't want to I don't know. I would love to have seen that too, because that's real life. That is real life. And if there's anything about Knots Landing, I feel my son always says, Mom, this doesn't feel like a soap opera. And I said, it really never did. Dallas, my mom loved Dallas, but Dallas to me was like a step up from, or a few steps up from where we were. It's about rich people, but Knots Landing felt like it was about real people, like in my neighborhood, you know? So until toward the end when they got kind of silly. So
Yeah, I mean, I would say the last few seasons got silly, and I think what happened too is they had different writers and producers. But one of the, you talked about Laura's brain cancer. One of the silver linings of the episode when she dies, the 2-part episode, is you got to see the Richard Avery character show that he really did care about her. He was so upset that she died alone. And that's what I always liked about Knots Landing as well, is somebody who could, be a bad character at times. They could also have redeeming qualities. Yeah. And I thought that was one of my favorite episodes when you see that he really cared about Laura. Of course, the twins being returned after a year of going through that. And that was agonizing as a fan to go through that, but I you could give me your, not opinion, but you could basically give me your choice. Sid and Karen or Mac and Karen. I go with Mac.
Mac and Karen, hands down. Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah. It may be where he was on longer. I don't know. When I go back and I watch the first couple of seasons, I do love Sid, but if I have to choose, Mac and Karen, hands down.
Yeah. And I always we talked about those final seasons not being great, but that final scene where Mac and Karen make up, they're in bed and he's tossing and turning. That was one of my favorite scenes. When he tells Karen, I'm not going to say I'm sorry anymore, and I'm not going to let this marriage go down the tubes. And you just see Karen look at him and go, I love you so much. That's why the show was so great. And great job. I think Michelle Lee advocated for this a lot because the producers were thinking about making his character having an affair. But I'm very glad that of the one couple on that series, that was the only couple that never, went through a serious marital problem. I mean, they did
really
in season
solid.
4. Yeah, they were very solid. And, that's why that show was so enjoyable. And, I was thinking about today too. We recently lost a great character on that show, and she also battled cancer, and that was Lar Lark Lincoln. And she was going to be on my show eventually. She was just, dealing with the cancer, obviously. And I was just so devastated when I had heard she passed, because she really was a talented actress, and she was a very nice person too.
Yeah, listen, that broke my heart. It really broke my heart because she was like Abby. Her character was like Abby because she was mean and conniving, and it's almost like you hated her, but you kind of loved her. So there was that love-hate relationship. But that actress that played her, me and my son talked, you have to be so good at acting to pull that off. And I'm going to be honest with you. When I met Donna Mills last weekend at the Dallas thing, I don't know why I thought this, but I kind of thought that she would have a little bit of, I think that she's so gracious and so kind shocked me, because I was kind of expecting her to act like Abby a little bit. I don't know why, even though that's a character, but she is the complete opposite. I mean, she was so sweet, so kind. And we had a couple of conversations. We had one-on-one conversation where she is just I don't know, but that's the level of talent that they have to make you believe that the characters are so bad to make you hate those characters. But that's just what a good actor does, So yeah, so it really hurt me, especially to know that Lard Park Lincoln died of breast cancer. That is devastating. So
yeah, it really was. And like I said, she was always so nice to me whenever we'd correspond and things like that. And then, I mentioned having Claudia Lanau, and she was so great. I mean, just a nice person. And then, of course, Tanya and her sister Jamie. I mean, two of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and that was so enjoyable. And I think that's what makes you feel good as a fan, is that when you meet these people and you see how polite they are and how respectful and appreciative they are of the fans, it makes you realize that you were rooting for the right people. And that's always very special to see.
Absolutely. Last weekend, I keep going back to last weekend, but let me be honest with you. That's like one of the highlights of my life. I don't know if I put a little video on the Not Standing, one of the fan groups that we're a part of, and how I had taken each one of the ladies a gift bag. And in the gift bag, I had put my 3 children's books and I signed them to each lady. And then I put a manila envelope in it with the letter that I had written to the podcast, just in case they didn't see it. Like I'm sure they get a million letters a week. And then I told them each, I said, I know you guys have been talking about a reboot for Not Standing. I said, I sat down a couple months ago and wrote a treatment. And they were like, oh my God. Like they were all shocked. And I said, I put the treatment in there, all of my contact information. I said, if y'all want to work with me, I would love to help bring Not Standing back to life. I have the first season laid out on my laptop here, like 8 episodes. So if they want to do this, I'm willing to do this. But when I was talking, I had given Michelle and Joan their gift bags right after the photo ops. Well, I couldn't get to Donna because she was talking to Morgan Fairchild. So I told my son, I said, let's just go back to the room. I'll run into her tomorrow somewhere during the signing. Then my friend Adam, who's my producer, he helps to put on that big event. He texted me and he said they're downstairs. And so I was in my pajamas. I got my clothes back on. I ran down with a bag and I found them in the restaurant. And it was Michelle Lee on this side, Donna Mills over here, and Morgan Fairchild next to her. They had not ordered. They did have their menus, but they hadn't ordered, or I wouldn't have, interrupted them. And I walked up and I said, I'm so sorry to interrupt your dinner. And they were like, we haven't even ordered. And I said, Donna, I said, I have been carrying this gift bag around for 2 days. I said, I got you something. And she went, for me? I was she couldn't believe it. And I said, yeah. And then Michelle Lee said, she goes, actually, Donna, she got me and Joan one, and she wants you to give me yours because she wants me to have 2 and you to have none. So that was a real lighthearted moment, and we laughed about that. But we were talking about what was in it. I told her, I said, I'm an author, and my last 3 books were children's books, and she had that gift bag, and she said, I have a new grandson, and I said, I do, and she said, thank you so much. I'll read these to him. And she just kept thanking me, and I was thinking to myself, why are you thanking me, lady? I need to be thanking you for taking they're just so gracious, so lovely, and so humble. And then, Michelle was talking about, thanking me for coming to the event. And I was like, no, thank y'all for coming, because I think that because at one time they were at the height of fame 40 years ago, I think that maybe they think they're not anymore. And I'm hoping that last weekend proved to them that we still love them. We still adore them. So, yeah.
Right. And I always felt like Donna, her character should have been nominated for an Emmy. She should have won one. So I was very happy a few years back when she won one for General Hospital, because she deserved to be an Emmy winner. And I mean, I'll tell you what, that's one thing fans have to understand in any show they watch, whoever the villain is, that is just a part they're playing. They're not like that in real life. And Donna, anytime you see Donna, she is the nicest person. You see her anywhere. She's never rude to anybody. So guess what? She's Donna Mills. She's not Abby Ewan.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what I was thinking. I think that I thought maybe that, because I have dealt with, well, I'm not going to say who, but on my show, I had this person who was, I'm not going to say pretty big name, but big in their field. And I had this person come on, and they were not nice. And, you're sitting in your studio together, and they're sitting right next to you in their chair, and they're not being nice. And that's tough to get through the next 23 minutes with somebody who is just not nice, and I was sitting there sweating and thinking, gosh, I wish this would already be over. Can I wrap this up quick? So when I see people like that who act that way, I just think I expect bigger people or bigger names to be that way too. And they were. I was just absolutely shocked at how kind and how sweet they were. And the next day on Sunday, most of the people at the hotel went home. I didn't fly home until Monday because, I didn't have to be home. But So at the autograph tables, they literally had no one. And I just walked right up to Donna and I said, I want to thank you for accepting my gift yesterday. And she leaned into me. She took my hand and leaned in, and she said, I looked at your books last night in my room, and she said, I just want you to know that you are so talented. Man, I about died and fell under the table. I was like, oh my God, thank you. And she said, Christy, you are very talented. I could have cried because I said, it's like one thing my son tells me that, but he's my kid. Of course, he's like, Mom, you're talented. But when somebody in this business, in the industry, looks at your work objectively and says you're very talented, man, that meant everything to me. And I told her, I said, I don't think you'll ever understand what that means to me. I don't think Donna Mills will never comprehend what her words of encouragement have meant to me. So,
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to, though, Christy, is what you are as a person and the respect that you have for everybody, that people could see right away when they spend 2 minutes with you. They say, you know what, this is a real good human being. And I think, you've proven that every day of your life. So let me ask you, going forward, what's the message you would send to somebody who's going through any type of, trials and tribulations? Like, what would you say to them as far as like, how to get through everything?
um, number one, don't let it get you down, no matter how hard it is. And I have been through some hard things in life. I mean, I know we get down, but don't let it keep you down. We get down and we're going to get down. That's the facts. Things are going to cause us to be depressed, sad, worry, scared, and that's just how it is. But don't let it keep you there. Always remember that tomorrow is a brand new day. Tomorrow might hold, who knows what tomorrow might hold. Like, 3 weeks ago, my biggest hope was to go down there and hand them my gift bag and get an autograph. I had no idea I was actually going to get to spend one-on-one time with them. So like, I'm like, you never know what the next day is going to hold. And so don't give up, don't quit, because what if you quit and then that next day was your big breakthrough? There were times, I remember my third chemo treatment. Well, I had 4 Red Devil. That's the hardest chemo you can have, the harshest chemo. And then I have 12 Taxol. And I remember on the 3rd Red Devil, I was like, I can't go get this. I can't, because it literally takes you down and they're just like that. And my son said, Mom, you have to. And I was like, okay, I have to. I had to. And so on that 4th one, I literally I told him, I said, Josh, I can't do this anymore. I have to quit. He's like, Mom, you can't. And I was like, okay, Chrissy, you can't quit. You got to go. If you want to get better, if you want to be here next year, because the doctor had told me in February, he said, if we hadn't called it when we did, you wouldn't have been here for Christmas this year. So I wouldn't have been around in Christmas of 2020. And so I just had it in my mind, no matter how hard it is, no matter what I go through, there is another side. There is another day. You can make it through. And I just encourage everybody to always remember that. Don't stop. Don't stop fighting. Just don't. No matter what's facing you, you can slay that giant. David and Goliath, he was just a little teeny guy, and he killed Goliath, that big giant, and cut off his head. And so that's who I try to think of. I'm like, okay, I might be little David, but I can kill that giant in front of me. So yeah, just don't give up. Don't give up ever, because life might have something fantastic the next day. And if you give up, you're going to miss it.
Right. Well, I think that's a wonderful message, Christy. I really thank you for giving me a few minutes today. Like I said, I really wanted to get you on this show because I really do, find what you do remarkable. And I really applaud you for everything you do. And you really are somebody that is like an inspiration to everybody, because you send the perfect message. And the message is, don't ever give up hope. And to me, that really says a lot about you. And I really do thank you for giving me a few minutes.
Listen, thank you so much. It was when I saw your email, I was actually standing with Adam, my producer at the time, there in the lobby of the hotel. And I was like, I said, have you heard of him? I said, I got this email. And he was like, wow. And when, I was just like, well, this is an honor to be asked, because like I said before, I always have people on my show, and nobody, ever says come on my show. And so it was an honor and a privilege to be on here. I really appreciate it. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, I thank you again for giving me some time, and, we'll have you back on again. And I really can't like I said, I definitely want to do something where we talk about Knots Landing more. It'll be a lot of fun. So thank you again for giving me a few minutes.
Well, thank you.
Well, folks, there you have it. You've gotten to know Christy Adams this past hour. But for those who have watched her and saw her podcast, read her books, everything that she's done, you see what a strong and remarkable human being she is. She's been knocked down a few times, no question about it, but she's always gotten back up. And getting back up is the most important thing, because you're never going to knock this woman out. She's always going to respond. She's always going to be strong. She's always going to fight, and she's always going to live her life the way she wants to live it. And I think the positivity and, impactfulness that she has says a lot about her and the type of person she is. 3 letters could really define her: CLW, and they stand for champion, legend, warrior. And that's who Christy Adams is. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.